Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John's Reports for the 29th of October. And as we head into that Friday setup before Halloween, end of the month configuration, we had seen that this peak in the NBI magenta fading slightly was going to create a little bit of reverb back, and it did. But we also knew that it was still bullish, as I was saying, because the NBI white readings here at 1.95, no chance of anything significant happening. In fact, it pushed all the way back up to those highs. We had the unveiling of, more spending. You're seeing GDP projections plunge, so the market feels that there's just going to be more liquidity available, which just means more easing from the Fed from that standpoint. And that pushed the NQ making its new highs, so that helped lift that one. And likewise, look at this white all the way down there. That's still consistent with buy setup, and of course the dollar took a big dump on that. Additional news of trillions more that are more likely to go through, and that led to a spike in the euro setup there, and that was the pivot of the magenta that started early in the morning and just continued throughout. And when you get that red crossing back above, it's also bullish, not to mention orange dipping below red DOC. At the same time, steel crossing above short line of the cyan, all positive from a euro standpoint. So that's the first big change there. Oil still holding on to its own. That's still creating additional pressures, and that's caused a lot of activity towards bonds, which drives the yield down. That's why it's pushed back up again, though it's got NBI white leading, so that may be short-lived on that bounce there. This is an interesting one. This is the Bitcoin of a 500 tick, just because it doesn't trade as much volume as others, so you can get down to that lower range. But quite interesting as you're having these other coins popping into popularity, and they created this little mini flash crash that took place all within one 500 tick bar here, where you went from the 61 down to that previous algo level, and as soon as it got to that positive extreme that was back over here from 1015, bought back right up immediately, and that just drove it back up. No idea what caused that. As part of the little scary thing that still gets to people on that, because it's so flexible, but it certainly makes a difference from the ETFs and even from a future standpoint. So from a 50K, what we saw at the beginning of the day was the magenta taking over from white, producing NBI white buy setup there, and pushing back forward. Now when it did reach that peak, white NBI in that dip, but it kept magenta and yellow above that 33 level, so still maintaining its bullish thread, and that's what pushed to the actual highs. Futures giving back just a fraction of it at this particular stage. If we look at the current setup, this is where the market ended, and so futures just filled back in. So nothing on the positive extreme standpoint, but from the early day, you can see that it was just straight up. Worth pointing out, when we do see some of these magenta dot setups, when we're looking at just this brief dip below the 33, what I look for too is if I've got a series of 3 to 4 bars going across where white hasn't crossed above red. In this case, the trigger for the magenta to show up is when it's above 5. But when you've had a series move, it makes sense when it's like a short, quick one like this, where you then see a little bit of dip, and then the red moves back above. But when it's an extended one, I want to see the red cross back above, the white cross back above the red, as it did when we got over here. And that actually produced fractionally more, not a whole lot. But it just gives you a little bit more room in the turnaround. And then we had that second wave up, where we had the slight move of magenta that didn't really fade until we got midway over here, and then just as a brief cross at that particular stage. And then finally the secondary one where the light rose color popped in, and that was just a quick dip. Tried to bring it back to where it was even there, and then it made a secondary one, but turned around with magenta back over, as well as the orange dipping, and that was the signal that you'd have to exit that one, and moved right back up to the top, produced another brief sell that kind of just went back and forth until did a little bit of muck, but then clearly Magenta got back over. It happened a couple of times, so whether it was here or there, if you wanted to give it a moment to see if that green was going to stay above, and or if there would be an additional rise in DSC red, and sure enough there was, so that pushed it back up, but triggered the exact same thing and just brought it back to the pretty much the equivalent. So just me averted right back to it. But that's worth noting on that, because this kind of setup is a little bit cleaner than when you have these long drawn out dips down below, and where you might get a Magenta. You just got to recognize it's going to be a very short-lived one. When you get the more clean setup that takes place there, usually I'm looking for a move to the 50%, which in this case it went to 50%, dipped down to below the 38, and then made its turnaround. It's when you're below 50% and you see those moves where you know you've got a good shot going to that 0% number. So just worth pointing out that little detail. As always, indicators will be coming out for the new month with some of the adjustments that I've been making within the program, and you'll have all of that. As always, though, I will keep updating you on the Skype chat. Trade well. We'll talk again later.